The Forgotten Woman. The sun was setting behind the dense African rainforest, painting the sky with shades of orange and red. Birds chirped, and the rustling of leaves filled the air. The jungle was alive, but one thing was out of place: a woman. She woke up on the damp forest floor, her body aching as if she had been asleep for days. Her clothes were torn and dirty, her feet bare. She shivered, even though the air was warm. As she sat up, she realized something terrifying. She had no memory of who she was. Her heart pounded. She looked around, hoping to recognize something, anything. But everything was unfamiliar. The trees stretched high, their thick branches blocking most of the sky. The sounds of insects and animals echoed around her, making her feel small and lost. She touched her forehead, trying to remember. Nothing. No name, no home, no past. She tried to think harder, but it was like staring into an empty void. Panic rose inside her. Who was she? How did she end up here? Why couldn't she remember anything? Then she felt something strange. Her stomach. She placed her hands on her belly. It was slightly swollen. Was she pregnant? Her breathing became shaky. How? Who was the father? A wave of fear hit her like a storm. She didn't even know if she was safe in this place. The jungle was wild, filled with unknown dangers. She needed to find help. Slowly, she got to her feet. Her legs were weak, but she forced herself to move. Every step felt heavy, but she had no choice. She followed a narrow dirt path, hoping it would lead somewhere. As she walked, she noticed small details: a broken branch, footprints in the mud. Someone had been here before. Maybe she wasn't alone. The thought both comforted and scared her. After what felt like hours, she heard something. Voices. Human voices. Hope filled her chest as she rushed forward. Through the thick trees, she saw a village, a small group of huts made of wood and straw. Smoke rose from a central fire, and people moved around, preparing for the evening. Before she could call out, someone saw her. A young boy, maybe 10 years old, stood at the edge of the village. His eyes widened in shock. "Baba!" he shouted, running back toward the huts. A woman. She came from the forest. In seconds, villagers gathered. Some held spears, others carried baskets of food. Their faces showed a mix of curiosity and caution. An older man, his face lined with age and wisdom, stepped forward. He wore a robe decorated with colorful beads. His eyes studied her carefully. "Who are you?" he asked in a deep voice. The woman opened her mouth, but no words came. She didn't know the answer. I don't know," she whispered, her voice weak. The villagers exchanged glances. A woman stepped forward, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Come. You are safe here." They led her into the village. Someone handed her a cloth to wipe her face. Another brought water, which she drank greedily. She felt their kindness, but also their suspicion. They were trying to understand her. As she sat by the fire, the elder asked again, "Where did you come from?" She hesitated. "I don't remember." A murmur spread through the crowd. A lost woman with no memory. That was unusual, but the biggest shock came next. An old woman, possibly a healer, knelt beside her and touched her stomach. The woman flinched but allowed it. The healer's eyes widened. "She is with child." Gasps echoed around the fire. The woman felt cold despite the warmth of the flames. She had no memory of anything, but she was pregnant. How? Who was the father? And why couldn't she remember? She looked around at the villagers, their faces filled with questions, but she had none of the answers. That night, she lay inside a small hut the villagers had prepared for her. She was grateful, but sleep didn't come easily. Her mind was restless. Then she dreamed. It wasn't a normal dream. It felt real. A dark sky, filled with glowing stars. A strange blue light surrounding her. A deep voice, whispering words she didn't understand. Then, one clear sentence. "Protect the child." She gasped and woke up, her body covered in sweat. What did it mean? And why did she feel like something, or someone, was coming for her? To be continued. The hidden past, unique and engaging. The night was silent, but inside the small hut, the woman lay awake. The whispers of the jungle outside did not scare her. It was the voice in her dreams that did. Protect the child. She touched her belly, her fingers trembling. Who had spoken those words? And why did it feel like more than just a dream? The moonlight streamed through the thatched roof, casting strange patterns on the walls. The villagers had been kind to her, offering food, shelter, and warmth. But she could feel it, their fear. She was an outsider, a mystery, a woman with no past, and a child with no father. As she lay in the dim hut, another strange feeling washed over her. Someone was watching. Her body tensed. Slowly, she turned her head toward the entrance. A shadow stood there, tall, silent, unmoving. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The hut was too dark to see a face, but she felt the presence, a deep, unfamiliar energy, as if the air itself had thickened. Then the shadow took a step forward, and in a low voice, it spoke. "You are not supposed to be here." Her breath caught. Who are you?" she whispered. The figure hesitated, then knelt down slightly, coming closer to her eye level. The dim light revealed the outline of a man, strong, covered in dust, his clothes torn like he had been running for days. His face was sharp, his eyes glowing faintly in the dark. Not human. She felt it before she even understood it. The man's voice was calm but urgent. "They will come for you soon. You must leave this village." She sat up, her heartbeat loud in her ears. "Who will come?" The man exhaled, as if frustrated. "You don't remember, do you?" She shook her head. "I don't remember anything." For a long moment, he said nothing. Then his gaze fell on her belly. A flicker of something. Fear, respect, pain, crossed his face. "You are carrying something important," he said softly. "And there are those who would do anything to stop it from being born." A chill ran through her. "What are you talking about? Who am I?" The man closed his eyes, as if making a decision. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled something out. A small silver pendant. He held it up. The moment she saw it, something inside her twisted. A memory, a flash of blue light, a whisper in an unknown language. Her breath hitched. I've seen this before." Her fingers trembled as she took the pendant from his hand. It was cold, impossibly smooth, glowing faintly under her touch. As soon as she held it, a flood of emotions crashed into her. Pain, fire, a distant explosion, a desperate escape, running, and then silence. Her head spun, and she nearly collapsed. The man caught her before she fell. "Slow down," he said. "The memories will return, but not all at once." She clutched the pendant tightly. "Who am I?" The man hesitated, then whispered, "You are the last of your kind." The word sent shivers down her spine. The last. What did that mean? But before she could ask more, a scream shattered the night. The villagers. The man's expression darkened. "They found us." A sudden gust of wind blew through the hut, knocking over the clay pots. Outside, torches flickered wildly as shadows moved in the darkness. The man grabbed her wrist. "No time. We need to go. Now." Her instincts screamed at her to follow him. But part of her hesitated. The villagers had taken her in, given her shelter. Could she just run while they were in danger? She turned to the man. "What about them?" His jaw clenched. "If we stay, they'd all die." And then she saw them, the figures emerging from the jungle. Tall, hooded, their eyes glowing in eerie blue. Her whole body froze. She had seen them before, in her dreams. And now, they had come for her. The chase begins. The night was alive with chaos. Screams echoed in the village. Flames flickered, casting long shadows across the ground. The villagers ran, their voices full of fear, and in the middle of it all, she stood frozen, her mind battling two realities. One she remembered, and one she did not. "You are the last of your kind." The man's words still rang in her head. The truth felt close, like a shadow moving just out of sight. But there was no time to think. The blue-eyed creatures had arrived. She turned to the stranger, the man who had given her the pendant, the only person who seemed to know who she was. His jaw was set, his stance ready for battle. "Run," he said, his voice firm. "Now." She didn't move. "Who are they?" "They are here for you." She looked toward the village entrance. 5 of them stood there, tall and cloaked, their glowing eyes locked onto her. They didn't move like humans. Their steps were slow, deliberate, almost as if they were gliding. The villagers backed away in terror, their weapons useless against such beings. Even the elders, who had seen many things, looked helpless. One of the creatures stepped forward. His voice was smooth, deep, and sent chills through her bones. "You must come with us." A pressure filled the air, heavy and unnatural. It pressed against her chest, making it harder to breathe. The man beside her gritted his teeth. "No, we fight." Then everything happened at once. The creatures raised their hands, and the world around her exploded into blue energy. The huts shattered like glass, the ground cracked, and people were thrown into the air. She stumbled, the force knocking her backward. The man grabbed her arm and pulled her up. "We need to go. Now." Her body reacted before her mind did. She ran. The jungle swallowed them in seconds. Trees blurred past. Roots threatened to trip her, but she didn't stop. The sound of destruction faded behind them, but she knew they were being followed. She dared to glance back. The creatures were moving through the trees, not running, not walking, just moving, like shadows shifting between the leaves, silent, fast, unstoppable. The man suddenly pulled her to the side, down a hidden path she hadn't seen. They slid down a steep slope, landing in thick grass. He grabbed her wrist, forcing her to look at him. "You need to trust me," he said, his voice urgent. "They will never stop hunting you." Her chest rose and fell rapidly. She wanted answers, but she could feel it. This was not the time. "Who are you?" she asked. The man hesitated, then finally said, "I was sent to protect you." A strange feeling washed over her. The words sounded familiar. Protect the child. The memory of the dream came crashing back. She touched her belly, her heart beat wild. The child, the pendant, the creatures, the missing past. It was all connected. Before she could speak, the jungle around them fell silent. The man stiffened. "They're here." A gust of wind swept through the trees. Leaves rustled, and the air grew thick with unseen energy. The shadows around them shifted. Then, a whisper. "Come with us." She turned sharply. One of the creatures stood right behind her. Her breath hitched. How had it moved so fast? The creature tilted its head, its glowing eyes scanning her. And then, to her shock, it knelt. "Forgive us," it whispered. "My queen." Her world stopped. "Queen." Before she could process what was happening, the man grabbed her and pulled her away. "No," he hissed. "Don't listen to them." She stumbled forward, but her mind was spinning. Who was she? Why were they bowing to her? And most importantly, if she was their queen, why were they hunting her? The truth revealed. The world was not what she thought it was. She sat on the cold stone floor, staring at her reflection in a pool of water. The face looking back at her was familiar, yet, somehow, it wasn't. Who was she? The question gnawed at her mind like an endless echo. They had been running for days, through jungles, rivers, and caves, until they finally stopped here, in the ruins of an ancient temple hidden deep in the heart of the rainforest. It felt safe for now. The man who had saved her paced nearby, his face shadowed by the dim blue light of strange symbols glowing on the walls. He hadn't spoken much since the night they escaped the village. But now, the silence was unbearable. She clenched her fists. "Tell me everything. No more secrets." The man exhaled and finally turned to her. "You really don't remember?" She shook her head. A flicker of pain crossed his face, but he quickly masked it. He sat down across from her, his hands resting on his knees. "Then listen carefully," he said, "because the truth will change everything." She braced herself. "You are not human," he began. "Not fully, at least." Her breath caught, but she didn't interrupt. "You were born far from here, on a dying world. A world torn apart by war. Your people were powerful, beings of both light and darkness. But they made one mistake." His eyes locked onto hers. "They created something that should have never existed." A strange chill ran through her body. "The child you carry." His voice softened. "It is not just a child. It is the first of its kind. A bridge between two worlds. A being of impossible power." She instinctively touched her belly. "But how?" His expression darkened. "Because you were chosen. You were supposed to be their salvation. But you ran." Her heartbeat pounded. "You came to Earth, trying to hide from them. But they found you." The memories were just out of reach, like shadows in the mist. "Why can't I remember?" she asked. His jaw tightened. "Because they erased you." Her blood turned cold. "They wiped your mind clean, hoping you would forget your past. Forget the war. Forget what they did to you." He paused. "But they underestimated you." She could barely breathe. "What do you mean?" He leaned forward, his voice barely a whisper. "Because even without your memories, you still ran. You still fought. You still survived." The words sent a shiver down her spine. She looked at the glowing symbols on the walls. They seemed familiar now. Ancient. Powerful. "Who are you?" she finally asked. The man hesitated. Then, with a heavy sigh, he said, "I was once your enemy." The world tilted. She stared at him, stunned. You were hunting me." He nodded. "Until I saw what they did to you. Until I realized the truth." He clenched his fists. "They never wanted to save our people. They wanted control. Power. And they would have used you to get it." Her hands trembled. This was too much. She wanted to scream, to cry, to wake up from whatever nightmare this was. But deep down, she knew this was real. She looked up at him. "So why are you helping me now?" The man's expression softened. He reached into his pocket and pulled out something small, a second pendant, identical to the one she carried. He held it out to her. "Because I remember you," he said, "even if you don't remember me." The pendant shimmered in the dim light, and then, as soon as her fingers touched it, everything came back. A flash of light, a distant battlefield. His face, standing beside her, not as an enemy, but as something more. Pain. Betrayal. A desperate escape. Her hand flew to her mouth as the memories surged forward like a tidal wave. Tears burned in her eyes. She looked at him, realization dawning. He wasn't just her protector. He was something much more. And now, the truth was finally out. But before she could say another word, the ground trembled. A cold wind rushed through the ruins, making the flames flicker wildly. The glowing symbols on the walls darkened, one by one. The man jumped to his feet, his body tense. "They found us." And then, in the doorway, the blue-eyed creatures stood, watching. But this time, they didn't attack. This time, they bowed. And in perfect unison, they spoke 3 words that made her blood run cold. "The Queen returns." The child's power. The wind howled through the ruins, carrying whispers of the past. She stood frozen, heart pounding, as the blue-eyed beings bowed before her. "The Queen returns." The words felt heavy, like an unbreakable chain dragging her into a fate she didn't understand. The memories had flooded back, but they were fractured, pieces of a puzzle she couldn't yet solve. The war, the betrayal, the desperate escape, and now this child inside her, a child that was never meant to exist. The man, her protector, her former enemy, stood beside her, his stance tense. He didn't trust them, and neither did she. One of the beings, taller than the rest, finally spoke. "Your Highness, you must leave this place. The council will arrive soon." The council. The name sent a shiver through her. She remembered them now. The ones who had stolen her memories. The ones who had tried to erase her existence. And they were coming for her. "No," she said, her voice sharper than she expected. "I'm done running." The beings exchanged uneasy glances. "Your Majesty," the tallest one hesitated, "we are not your enemy. We have come to protect the child." Her hand instinctively went to her belly. The child. Something was wrong. She could feel it. A strange warmth spread through her stomach, pulsing like a second heartbeat. It wasn't pain, but it was powerful, growing, awake. The man beside her noticed. "What's happening?" She opened her mouth to answer. But then the world split apart. A wave of pure energy exploded from within her, knocking everyone off their feet. The ground cracked. The sky itself seemed to ripple. And for a brief moment, she wasn't in the ruins anymore. She was floating, somewhere vast, endless. And before her, suspended in a sea of golden light, was the child. Her child. But it wasn't just a child. It was something more. The tiny figure, barely formed, glowed with an unnatural radiance. Energy swirled around it, moving like liquid fire. Then it turned its head and looked at her. The child saw her. Her breath hitched. Impossible. "Mother." The voice wasn't a whisper. It wasn't a thought. It was inside her. The child was speaking to her. "They will come, but I am not afraid." She reached out, trembling. "Who? What are you?" The golden light pulsed. "I am the first. I am the bridge. I am the end and the beginning." Tears burned in her eyes. This was no ordinary child. This was something beyond understanding. "I will protect you." And just like that, she was back. The ruins returned. The others lay on the ground, recovering from the energy blast. The man rushed to her side, gripping her arms. What happened? His eyes searched hers, desperate for an answer. She struggled to breathe. What had she just seen? Then, the sky above them ripped open, a massive tear in reality itself, swirling with shadows and lightning. And from within it, they came. Not the blue-eyed beings, not warriors. Something worse. Figures cloaked in darkness, moving without form, without shape. Their presence burned the air. Reality bent around them. The council had arrived. And this time, they weren't here to erase her. They were here to erase everything. The final battle. The sky was bleeding. A massive rift had opened above them, swirling with black energy and flickering lightning. The ruins trembled as if the earth itself was afraid. And then they descended. The council. Not men, not creatures. Something worse. Shadows wrapped in silver light, shifting in and out of form. Their presence was like a void, sucking the warmth from the air, bending reality itself. The villagers had feared the blue-eyed beings, but these were gods, or devils. She felt the child inside her stir. Not with fear, with anger. "They must not touch you, mother." The voice echoed inside her mind, strong and ancient. She gritted her teeth. No one was going to take her child away. The man, her protector, her enemy-turned-ally, stood beside her, his body tense. "We can't fight them," he whispered. "They control everything." She turned to him, eyes burning. "Not everything." Then she stepped forward. The council didn't move. Their faceless forms hovered above the cracked earth, watching, waiting. One of them finally spoke. A voice that wasn't a voice. It entered her mind, slipping through her thoughts like cold fingers. The abomination must not be born. Her stomach clenched. Her child. The first of its kind. A being of two worlds. A being that shouldn't exist. And that's why the council was here. Not for her. Not for revenge. They had come to erase the future. The man beside her pulled a weapon, a blade made of dark metal, humming with unseen power. If we fight, we die. She didn't look at him. Then we don't fight. She commanded. She unleashed. She let go. And suddenly, the sky itself cracked. The energy inside her, the power that had been hidden, the strength that had been caged, it erupted. Golden light burst from her, a shockwave that tore through the ruins. The blue-eyed beings fell to their knees. The jungle bent backward, trees snapping, the wind howling like a wounded beast. And for the first time, the council stepped back. They had never stepped back before. She lifted her hands, her eyes glowing. "Leave," she commanded, "or I will show you why you fear me." The council didn't answer. Then they struck. Reality shattered. The air became glass, breaking and reforming. The ruins disappeared, replaced by a battlefield that didn't exist, a war that had never ended. She saw herself, 1,000 versions, fighting, falling, rising. Memories flooded back. She had fought before. She had lost before. But this time, she wasn't alone. Her child burned inside her like a star. And for the first time, the council, the beings who ruled existence, feared something greater than themselves. They feared what she had become. The queen, the mother, the beginning. And then, she unleashed hell, the ultimate sacrifice. The universe was breaking. She could feel it in her bones, in the space between her thoughts. The battlefield around her was no longer earth, no longer sky. It was something else. A realm of shifting shadows, of endless echoes, where time itself had fractured. And at the center of it all, she stood alone. The council had stopped speaking. They no longer whispered threats or warnings. Now, they fought. Blades of light slashed through the void. The ground beneath her feet cracked and fell into nothingness. She dodged. She struck back. She burned. But even with all her power, she knew the truth. She couldn't hold them forever. Mother. The voice, small yet infinite, spoke in her mind. Her child. The being inside her, the impossible life she carried, pulsed with a golden glow. It was watching. It was waiting. You do not have to fight anymore. Her breath hitched. The council advanced, their forms shifting like living storms. There were too many. The man, her protector, her last ally, was still fighting, but even he was slowing down. He knew the end was near. She clenched her fists. I will not let them take you. The child was silent for a moment. Then softly, they cannot take what I choose to give. She gasped as light erupted from within her. Not pain, not destruction. Creation. Her body lifted into the air, golden energy swirling around her. The council faltered, their forms rippling. I am the first and the last. The child's voice echoed through the void. I am the bridge, the path, the new beginning. The council screamed, not in anger, but in fear. They lunged, but they were already too late. A final wave of light exploded outward. Not a weapon, not a curse, a gift. And suddenly, everything stopped. The war, the chaos, the pain. She was standing again on solid ground. The sky was blue. The jungle was untouched. The village was whole. The battle was gone. She looked down, heart racing. Her hands were empty. Her child was gone. Tears blurred her vision. She dropped to her knees, hands trembling. No, she whispered. No, no, no. A soft breeze wrapped around her, warm and familiar. I am here, Mother. Everywhere. Always. She gasped, looking up at the sky, feeling the truth settle deep in her soul. Her child hadn't died. It had become something greater. It had rewritten reality. The council was gone. The war was erased. The future had changed. She was free. She closed her eyes, tears slipping down her face. "Thank you." The wind carried one last whisper. "We will meet again." And then, silence. The man stepped forward, his expression unreadable. He knelt beside her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You did it," he said. "The war is over." She wiped her tears, staring at the sky. "No, it's just beginning." And somewhere, far beyond the stars, something new was being born.